it's important that the court remember those facts, and that would be relevant to your sentencing. There were other things that we argued and introduced, but candidly, he was so young and they were so minor in comparison to this case. We think the big aggravation outside of what you heard in trial is the fact that he had this prior incident of a felony obstruction. And that would be all that we would argue or present us to Mr. Clements.
All right, Mr. Clements, we're kind of breaking this up in pieces, okay? So I'm going to send you back here in just 1 second. Before I do that, I want to make sure I tell you here on the record that after sentencing today, you're going to have some post-conviction rights. You have a right to file a motion for new trial. You'd have to do that within 30 days of the date of sentence, which will be today. You also have a right to file a notice of appeal. You'd have to do that within 30 days of today's date, or 30 days on any adverse ruling on your motion for new trial. And I'm going to ask that Mr. Salmons continue to represent you to at least help you preserve any appellate rights you wish to pursue, and he can assist you in seeking appellate counsel through the State Defender's Office, okay? Additionally, you have a right to file a habeas corpus action. You have to do that within 4 years of today's date. So those are appellate rights, and they're will be on your sentence, so they'll be in writing on there as well. And Mr. Salmons will continue to represent you at least until he takes whatever's actions necessary to preserve any appellate rights you wish to pursue and help you apply for appellate counsel. All right. So, Mr. Clements, I'm going to let you go back with the deputies, and then I'll bring you back out in a little while, and we'll continue with this proceeding. And we can bring out Mr. Velasquez. All right, this is State versus Eric Velasquez, 19 CR 1065C. We're here for purpose of sentencing. Mr. Velasquez, what we're going to do is the state's, well, your attorney's going to be able to present any evidence in mitigation. Then the state's going to present any specific acts in aggravation. And then we're going to take a break for a minute. And I'm going to deal with Mr. Garcia, and then we'll come back out and continue with this matter. Okay, so we're kind of breaking up piece by piece. Just wanted you to understand where we were. Before I forget, let me also tell you, you have some post-conviction rights. You have a right to file a motion for new trial. You have to do that within 30 days of today's date. You also have a right to file a notice of appeal. You have to do that within 30 days of today's date or within 30 days of any adverse ruling on your motion for new trial. And Mr. Wilson's going to remain your attorney to assist you with helping preserve any appellate rights you wish to pursue, and he'll also assist you in seeking appointment of appellate counsel if you choose to do that. I also need to tell you, you have a right to file a habeas corpus action. You'd have to do that within 4 years of today's date. All of that's going to be on your sentence, so you'll have a chance to review that and speak to Mr. Wilson about that when this is all concluded today. All right, then Mr. Wilson, any evidence you'd wish to present in mitigation?
Well, we just have two witnesses that we'd like to bring up.
All right.
Okay, first of all, if Mr. Velasquez's sister could come on up. Just come on up and have a seat right up there. All right. You raise your right hand.
My right hand.
You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Okay, we need to speak up a little bit.
Close that mic.
Okay.
Okay, and as I was telling you outside, you're not on trial or anything here, so just relax. We just want to talk to you a little bit about the life that you and Eric had.
Okay.
First, what is your name?
My name is Griselda Turcios.
Okay, what is your relationship to? Okay, say that again and say it slowly. Maybe spell it out for the.
Griselda Turcios, Griselda. And my last name is Turcios.
Okay, and what is your relationship to Eric Velasquez?
He's my big brother.
Your big brother. So you've known him your entire life.
Yes.
Okay. Now, I just want to ask you a little bit about your home life. Your father, well, first of all, how old are you?
I'm 18.
Okay, so you've known him for 18 years.
Yes.
All right. Now, just tell me, first of all, did you ever really know your father very well?
I did, but he got deported, so I really didn't get to,
How long? Okay, so how long ago was he deported?
like 2 years, 3 years ago.
Okay. All right. Now, what about your mother?
Well, we don't have the same mother. He has a different mother, and I have a different mother.
Okay,
But
so now what do you
his-
know about Mr. Velasquez's mother?
She's not here. She got deported too
Okay.
a few years back, a long time ago.
All right, so 2 years ago when this incident happened, Mr. Velasquez had no father, and Mr. Velasquez had no mother.
No, he didn't have a mother figure or a father figure.
Okay.
He
All right.
basically raised himself with his grandma.
Okay, with his grandmother. Where's his grandmother now?
She's sick. She can't make it. She's not good at all.
Okay, all right, I think we'll be talking a little bit more about that with her. So just tell me a little bit, and you can talk freely here. Tell me a little bit about your home life. And, well, for you and Mr. Velasquez, you live together, correct?
Sometimes. It was
Sometimes.
complicated.
Okay, sometimes you're in a house with them, sometimes you're not in a house
Yes.
with them. All right, so it's very fluid.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. What do you know about Mr. Velasquez's home life?
Well, he really didn't have nobody to look up to or anything. He was always, like, how can I say it? Well, he basically just grew up by himself. The only persons he really had, like, a relationship with was me and my siblings. He really didn't, how can I say? I'm a little nervous, but
No, you can relax. I know how you feel. When I was doing my closing argument, I had to get some water because my mouth was so dry, so I know exactly how you feel.
But he made sure that, because he knew we looked up to him a lot, He was our big brother and everything. And he would always try to set a good example for us, even though people say he's a monster and all that. But I don't believe that because, I've been with him my entire life, and he's always taken care of us. He's always helped us and everything.
Now, when you say he's taking care of you, what do you mean?
When I would go through something, he was the one who was there for me. He would find ways to, like, make sure that our family was good. Yeah.
All right, now just one more question. Now, as you know, Mr. Velasquez, along with, well, he's not here, but along with Hector Garcia, they committed several burglaries. You're aware of that, correct?
Yeah.
All right, what's your opinion of the fact that Mr. Velasquez would have done something like that? And we know he did it. That's not what I'm asking you.
Yeah.
I'm saying, what is it, this kid who's helped you out all your life, the fact that he would do something like that? How do you feel about that?
I feel like he's so dumb. He get on my nerves for real. But that's my brother, And no matter what, I don't see him as I don't see him as a monster. I don't see him as nothing like that. I see him as my big brother who was there for me always since the start.
Okay,
That's it.
all right. Is there anything else you'd like to say?
Dad, I love you. And he's very strong, you know. He's a very strong man.
What do you mean by that?
Nothing can break him, no matter what the situation is. He's more stronger than me, and that's why I look up to him, no matter what he's done, what errors he's done. For me, he's still my big brother that I look up to.
Okay. All right, well, thanks.
All right, thank you.
Step down.
I may have
Well,
some
hold on.
questions.
Oh, I'm sorry. Ms. Fansworth, now as you know, she works with the district attorney, they're the prosecutor, and she'd just like to ask you a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah?
I just want to ask a few questions. So before your brother went to jail 2 years ago for this, were you all living in the same house?
No,
Where were you living?
I live with my mom.
I thought your mom was deported.
We have different moms.
Okay. He was living with his grandmother?
Yes.
Did you know that his grandmother helped him load up the stolen guns the day after Blane Dixon was murdered?
I do not know nothing about that, to be honest.
Did you help Eric at all in hiding out the stolen guns after Blane Dixon was murdered?
No,
Did you know that those guns were stolen from Double D's?
no.
How did you find out that your brother was involved in this murder?
He called me and he told me when they were about to get him, like,
When the police were about to arrest him?
yes, he just told me that to keep my head up.
Okay. How much older is he than you are?
Like a year.
So you're like 18?
Yes.
Okay, I don't have anything else.
All right.
All right, thank you, ma'am. You can step down. Mr. Wilson?
Yes. And then, I'm sorry, I don't remember your name, but come on up. All right, raise your right hand. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Okay, you can have a seat.
Oh, this is so
now-
intimidating.
Well, again, and there's some water right there if you need it like I did. Okay, so what is your name?
My name is Paola Gonzalez,
Okay, and how do you know Mr. Velasquez?
family friend.
Is a family friend?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, you had told me that you're up here to speak for yourself, but also,
I was asked by his grandmother, Elvira Castro, who can't make it, as his sister said, because of health-related reasons, and his mother, Erica Velasquez, who is deported in Mexico. We've been in contact with her.
all right. Now, what is it that you do for a living?
I am a teacher. I am an ESOL teacher for a Title I school.
Okay. Now, I know you had a statement. Would you like to
Yes, I
read
would.
a statement that could make it a little?
Yes, I was extremely nervous, so I just prepared something.
Sure.
So, Your Honor, I was asked to speak today on behalf of Eric's mother and grandmother. His grandmother wanted to be here today, but was ordered by her doctor not to due to health-related reasons. My name is Paola Gonzalez, and I'm a public school educator for a Title I school. I specifically work with bilingual students as an ESOL teacher. I'm here with my family today to support Mr. Eric Velasquez as family friends. Eric is not a member of a crew, as has been insinuated by the state. He is the product of the justice system and has never had the same opportunities as many of his American peers. Eric was raised by his grandmother because his mother was deported when he was 3 years old. His dad remarried when he was a baby, and he has never had a steady guide and role model through his father. Eric's father also had to leave this family when he too was deported to Mexico. Eric entered the police station of his own volition to turn himself in. Eric was then immediately treated with violent aggression that resulted in a physical injury in police custody that is untreated to this day. As you can see on his ear, Eric has a ball of pus that is growing bigger as time passes. He was wearing ear gauges when he turned himself into police custody. Eric was thrown to the floor and had an officer restrain him by pressing their knee to his neck, which resulted in the gauges perforating his ear. Not only is his injury untreated, when he was moved to Hall County Jail, he was placed in protective custody, and this was used as an excuse to bar him from showering for more than 5 days. He was denied the human right to hygiene until I personally called and spoke to Sergeant Galloway. The same sergeant was rude and aggressive, and please excuse my language, even calling me a fucking bitch he hated dealing with while I was still on the line. Eric was denied several privileges like scheduled video calls with loved
I would
ones.
object. I don't know that she has any firsthand knowledge of this. This isn't her talking about what she knows about.
I think
this.
she would
I'm the one that called Sergeant Galloway, ma'am.
see definition of firsthand knowledge.
Overruled, I'm gonna give some leeway. Go ahead.
Eric was denied several privileges like scheduled video calls with loved ones, even as of yesterday with me, with the excuse that these things are not a right. However, there were zero reasons to deny said privileges. Eric has had no poor behavioral reports or need for discipline since he voluntarily turned himself into the police. The American justice system states that we are innocent until proven guilty, but Eric has been treated with disdain and violence, marked as a proven guilty criminal since the moment he surrendered himself. Eric was a 17-year-old boy in July of 2019. He's made mistakes and he's tried to atone for them, but he's also answering for his cousin's mistakes today. Hector Garcia Solis made a split-minute decision by himself of his own accord that regrettably took a deputy's life. They were both 17-year-old children, not adult men. As an educator, I know that the brain stops developing at 25 years old. Research states that adolescence is a critical window for developing skills to regulate emotions, making and evaluating decisions, and judging risk and reward. The most important brain area to become fully wired up in adulthood is the prefrontal cortex, the area of the brain that handles higher level cognitive abilities associated with decision-making, solving problems, and self-control. It is also important for cognitive control, the ability to suppress impulses in favor of more appropriate actions. However, that pattern of development looks very different in emotionally charged situations and when there is childhood trauma. Developmentally, research shows teenagers are more open to risky behavior because of said brain development. Not only this, but during the event in question, proper de-escalating techniques were not involved. Hector, the admitted shooter, was faced with immediate and hostile actions from the deputies. He was cursed at and threatened, and these poor impulse controls were further exacerbated that caused the terrible tragedy. Your Honor, I am not making excuses for the defendants. Jails are meant for rehabilitation, not only for retribution. These boys, London and Eric, deserve a chance for rehabilitation. Eric shows remorse for his mistakes. We've had several conversations about how much he has matured since being incarcerated. He's not the same person who was incarcerated 2 years ago. He has found God and inner peace. He prays and reads the Bible every day. He actually made fun of me when he found out that I had never read the Bible, and I am now reading it because of a conversation I had with Eric. Your Honor, I very respectfully want to remind you that when the malice murder and the 2 other charges were dropped against Mr. London Clements, you yourself stated that the state did not produce enough evidence to prove the charges. And in regard with Mr. Velasquez, you said there was a very thin line of what the state was able to prove. We are not asking Eric to be let go with time served. Both Eric and his family and friends understand that there is a debt that needs to be paid to society. All we are very humbly pleading for is a chance for Eric to show society he is not the monster the state has painted him out to be. That dreadful night in July has changed lives and has brought pain to not only the victim and his family, but pain to all families involved. Thank you.
Okay, is there it?
Mr. Wilson, order in the court, please.
Okay.
Mr. Wilson?
Order in the court. Yes, could I just ask you, is there anything else that you'd like to say that you know of Eric's home life?
I know of Eric's home life. I brought his grandmother in the very first day in a wheelchair. She was sitting in the back. And it is sad, the life that she is living without Eric. Eating moldy food, trash everywhere. Eric was her companion. Eric was the one who accompanied her to the doctors. She goes through the dialysis and has to be admitted to the hospital 3 times a week because there is no one there to take care of her. So she's the one that asked me to be here today and to plead on her behalf. She wanted to be here so bad, but the doctor ordered her not to be. That first day caused such a bad impression on her that her health declined since then. So that's the only reason I'm here. And his mother, of course, who is in Mexico and had to leave him when he was 3 years old.
Okay, anything else you'd like to say?
Keep your head up, Eric. You're not by yourself, and we love you.
Okay, now, as I said, Ms. Vance, she works with the district attorney, they're the prosecutor. She'd like to come up and just ask you a couple questions, too.
Yes, sir.
And keep in mind, you're not on trial here, so you have nothing to be nervous about.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Vance?
So the information that you just told the judge about how Eric was treated after he was arrested, you didn't see any of that yourself?
No, ma'am, I did not.
So that would come from Eric?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Are you aware that Eric's grandmother helped him load the stolen guns into a stolen car the day after the deputy was killed in this case?
No, ma'am, I was not.
You're an ESOL teacher?
Yes, ma'am.
Right? How long have you done that?
5 years. I started as a pre-K teacher for 2 years, and now I got moved to ESOL, so 3 years ago.
And certainly, you've seen a lot of children that aren't native English speakers, right?
I work specifically with Hispanic children, yes, ma'am.
And you've seen a lot of Hispanic children, even with parents that may be deported, grow up and be successful, correct?
It's most likely for a child who has two parents that are here and active in their lives to be more successful than, in my opinion, children who were not raised by their parents.
Sure, but you're not telling the judge to give Eric a pass because his parents were deported, are you?
No, I'm telling him that he has not had the same opportunities as, for example, a white child who would never have two deported parents.
Or a Hispanic child whose parents were still here and able to provide a stable home.
Yes, ma'am, the same opportunities as a child who has two loving parents at a home like I had.
Right.
And I don't believe he has had the same opportunities, no, ma'am.
Did you watch the trial?
Yes, ma'am.
You watched the whole trial?
Yes, ma'am.
What do you, I'm just curious, you've asked the judge to give leniency. What do you think Eric should be sentenced to?
I think that I am not a law person. I did not study to go to school for law, but I think that whatever the opportunity would be, that he would have a chance to rehabilitate himself and be there and give his mom one last hug.
Do you think Eric should be released?
Not today, no, ma'am.
Okay. Do you know what the mandatory minimum sentencing scheme is on murder?
No, ma'am. Like I said, I didn't study law.
Okay. How well do you know Eric personally?
I would like to say, well, we've had a lot of conversations, and I feel for him, for his home life.
Sure. How well do you know his grandmother and his siblings?
I would say I would know them well. Like I said, I personally picked up his grandmother and brought him, have been in contact with her. I'm actually going to meet up with her to see if Eric's mom can get a visa to come take care of her, because like I said, there's no one but Eric for her.
How well do you know Hector Garcia Solis?
Not well.
You know that that's Eric's cousin, correct?
Yes, ma'am, I do. His Eric's mom and Hector's mom are first cousins.
Okay. And you heard in the trial that Hector's lawyer says Eric is the bad influence that led Hector down this path, correct?
I did hear that, yes, ma'am.
Okay, what do you think about that?
I would say that wasn't true from my personal experience, but like I said, I don't know Hector that well to see where he would say that from.
Did you know that Hector and Eric had committed these burglaries on Friday night into Saturday morning?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
I found out through his grandmother.
So certainly there are sides to Eric that you don't know.
Of course, there's sides to everyone that we don't know. We all have two sides.
Sure, and especially young men, teenage boys may have sides that they don't want the people that they look up to know about.
Yeah, for example, I deal with a lot of kids who think they're tough and who think they're all that, and they end up being teddy bears who just misunderstood.
Did you know that Eric had told people in the past that he was a gang member?
No, ma'am.
Did you know that he had said he was a gangster disciple?
Objection. We had a long trial, and maybe I'm wrong, but I don't remember any of this coming up.
Me neither, not on trial.
Bringing up some evidence. things that we're-
Overruled, I think the state, when you put up character evidence, they're entitled to ask, as long as they have a good faith basis, to ask witnesses if they're aware of those allegations. Overruled, you can continue.
Had you ever heard that?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Did you know that Eric had prior juvenile court run-ins?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
Okay. Did you know that he was arrested about 2 months before this by an officer with the Gainesville Police Department for being in possession of a stolen gun?
No, ma'am, I did not. I knew he was arrested, but not what for.
Okay, did you know that Hector was actually driving in that arrest? And when they were arrested in May of 2019, that there was the gun in the car and also black gloves and a bandana in the car?
Like I said, I knew he was arrested, but not what for, or the details.
Okay. Did you know that he was involved in the burglary a year prior at Texano, where Hector testified and admitted that they had written F the police and City of Gainesville on the walls in Texano?
I get that confused with the burglary that Hector said he did by himself, so I'm not sure which is what.
Did you know that he was charged with theft by receiving a stolen vehicle in February 2018, as well as that separate burglary at Texano?
No, ma'am, I did not.
Okay. Would you agree that it's appropriate for the court to consider if he was involved in a burglary and theft crime streak that, you know, a day and a half later led to the murder of a police officer, that it would be important for the court to consider if he had a recent history of thefts and burglaries and possessing stolen guns?
Well, I understand that there's a difference sentencing for malice murder than there is for robberies. So if that's all we were looking at, then yes, ma'am. But like I said, I'm not a lawyer and I haven't studied law.
Okay. Nothing else. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd just like to ask one last thing. Okay, so we just learned that you don't know everything about Eric Velasquez, which I'm sure is a great shock to the courtroom. But one thing, when we were talking about the sentencing, you know, one thing he's looking at here is a possibility of life without parole. He could be in jail for the rest of his life. Why do you feel the court should not give him life without parole?
Because today he's looking at life without parole because of what Hector did, because what if Hector admitted.
Well, hold on. When you say Eric is also somewhat responsible for?
No, sir, he ran. He didn't have a gun. From the video, if I remember, I think he was the first one out the car, and he's nowhere around the videos or the deputy when Hector.
Outside of what happened on that night, just knowing Eric, knowing Eric's character, why do you believe that he should not be given life without parole?
Because he's made some mistakes, but that's not all he is. He's not, his whole life shouldn't just be atoning for his whole life mistakes and dying in jail without seeing his grandmother one last time, without being able to hug his mom since he was 3. So yes, he made some mistakes, but I do believe that the way that he grew up has led us here to where we are today.
Okay, so you believe that Eric, that he's a kid who is capable of redemption?
Yes, sir. From the conversations I've had, and like I said, I personally started reading the Bible, and Eric made fun of me for calling myself a Christian woman and not reading it. And I told him, you know what, you're all right. He reads every day, he prays every day, and that's not the Eric that was 2 years ago. He has found God, and he has found inner peace.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else, Ms. Vance?
Nothing else for this witness.
Thank you, ma'am. You can step down. All right, anything else, Mr. Wilson?
Nothing else except for argument, which I believe we'll be saving for later.
Correct. All right,
I would have some aggravation. Your Honor, in terms of aggravation, the court heard specific evidence as to Mr. Velasquez as well at the 404 hearing. The court had reserved, but the May 3rd, 2019 arrest that's still active in state court as of last night when I checked, Your Honor, and I'm sure will probably just be resolved some other way, but it was for possession of a stolen gun. Hector was driving in that incident. Adrian Verduzco was also in the car in that incident, and I believe the court heard from Jason Pierce, who was the officer at that time in the 404B hearings. Eric was arrested for possessing that stolen gun. It's so significant to the state that there were also black gloves and a bandana found in the car in that incident as well, which the state would suggest a reasonable inference is that there was some intent to commit thefts at that time as well. That incident was May 3rd, 2019, so that's approximately 2 months before Blane Dixon was murdered. During that incident, the officers, because of the bandana, started asking about gang involvement. We did have some information from others in the case that Eric had identified at some points as a gangster disciple. And Adrian Verduzco was on tape at that point telling Jason Pierce that Eric was a gangster disciple. There were the 2 other prior thefts and burglaries. The February 2018 theft by receiving a vehicle. The witnesses to that were Jose Penuelos and Kelly Carlton. The court did deny that as a 404, but you heard evidence of it, so we still think you can consider it in terms of aggravation. The car was reported stolen, Your Honor, and Eric Velasquez was found later in the driver's seat and was charged with that. And then he was also charged for the August 2018 burglary at Texano Auto Sales and Attention to Detail, along with Hector. Those Hector and Eric were on ankle monitors through juvenile court at that time because of prior juvenile court cases, and were able to, the GPS from the ankle monitors was able to put them in the location of Texano and Attention to Detail. And I believe that Anthony Macias testified in the 404B hearing as well, because he was also charged in that case, and he had made statements that inculpated them in that burglary. Judge, I also did want to call Agent Abercrombie to rebut some of the specific statements that you just heard. So at this time, I would call her to the stand.
All right.
I'll just do it off my phone.
Swear the testimony you should give before the court today should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes, sir, I do.
All right, you can be seated. Ms. Vance.
Can I just, publish off here? Whoops. Okay. I'm going to use the podium.
I don't believe it's turned on, Ms. Vance, the actual podium.
Well, I am going to actually use it. Let me take a second. That's on. So we heard from you in the trial. Did you have a chance to view Mr. Eric Velasquez after he had been arrested by law enforcement?
Yes, I did.
Okay, and you were the case agent on the case.
Yes, I was. And after Eric was arrested, he was brought to the Hall County Law Enforcement Center where I met with him and ultimately took a photograph of him.
And we just heard some statements that were made by Eric, apparently to other family members, and to, got through to his ESOL teacher that was a family friend, that he was injured during the arrest process. Did you get a chance to see him after he was arrested?
Yes, I did. I met with him after he was arrested.
Did you get a chance to take a picture of him?
I did.
Did he have any injuries?
He did not.
Did he have gauges in his ears?
He had black earrings in his ears, but they were not gauges.
And I'm guessing maybe the court knows what gauges are, and maybe the audience members do. Can you explain the difference between an earring and a gauge?
I'll try. An earring just has a post in it in your ear, and a gauge is where it's like spreads open your earlobe.
So a gauge is like a little dish that stretches your earlobe out.
Yes, and you
versus
can
like just-
see. Yes, and you can see through it.
Okay. Did you have a photograph that you took of Eric at the time that you met with him after he'd been arrested, which supports your testimony that he didn't have any injuries?
Yes, I took a photograph of him on. It would have been Monday, July 8th, and it was around 4 p.m. While he was located at the Hall County Law Enforcement Center.
Did you actually interview him as well?
Yes, I interviewed him, and after I interviewed him, he was arrested. And as part of my normal operating procedure, I always have to fill out a GBI arrest record for internal paperwork purposes. And part of that process is taking a photograph of them to attach to that particular piece of paperwork.
Okay. What number?
1 through 11, I believe? Did you just name sentencing, like 1 through 11? Just did State's exhibit.
Okay.
I can do sentencing.
That's fine, because we've already got like 1 through 11. Okay, so.
Okay.
So this would be 12. Judge, I'm going to substitute with images, printed images for the record, but doing this quickly in rebuttal. I've got images on a phone that were provided by Agent Abercrombie, so if I can publish that way and then mark them and then substitute as soon as I can get them printed?
Any objection?
Well, the pictures, I know you just showed me some of them. If I could look at them again. Only that one? Is that
No,
what
I'm
you're
going to show, I have others that I would argue go to character as well.
Well, if we're here for rebuttal, though, I don't necessarily know what anything, both of our witnesses have said they don't know everything about Eric Velasquez. No one is saying they absolutely know every single thing about any possible gang membership, anything like that. I think she stated that she doesn't know every single thing about Mr. Velasquez. For rebuttal, I don't really understand why any of these pictures would be relevant, except right there, I get that one, the one where we're showing what he looked like after the arrest. Beyond that, and this is something she'd want to show earlier that would have been different, but as far as rebuttal goes, I don't see any relevance whatsoever.
This is sentencing, Mr. Wilson. The
Yes.
state's presenting evidence in aggravation of sentence, right?
Yes,
And you put up the good character of your client. Ms. Vance, I would think, is entitled to question that
Well-
character.
however, she has brought up Agent Abercrombie as a rebuttal witness, I believe were her exact words. That being the case, it seems to me the only evidence that should be introduced is direct rebuttal to what we've heard before. And many of these pictures are not direct rebuttal to what we've heard before.
All right. Make your objection as to each photograph as it's tendered, because I have no idea what you're talking about. But
Okay.
this is the state's opportunity to present evidence and mitigation. So maybe she called her a rebuttal witness, but she's not a rebuttal witness. That happens after they presented evidence, then you present evidence, and then they come back to rebut what you've said.
I'll drop my objection because she's not going to show anything that you don't already know, so.
All right.
Yes.
Go ahead, Ms. Vance.
All right, I'm going to mark this as State's Exhibit 12 for sentencing purposes, and I'm publishing it now. Agent Abercrombie, is this a photograph of Mr. Velasquez after he was arrested and when you were questioning him?
Yes, it is. I took this photograph of him.
Okay. And was this after you had questioned him or before you questioned him?
I believe this would have been after I interviewed him.
Okay, do you remember about how long it was that you were interviewing him?
I do not recall, but I know that I took this photograph around 4 p.m.
Okay. And I'm going to zoom in a little more. Does it appear that there is any injury to his ear?
No, it does not.
Okay. And Judge, I will substitute this as State's Exhibit 12.
Any other objection, Mr. Wilson?
No.
State's 12 is admitted.
Were you also able to find some photographs that indicate gang affiliation that you pulled up out of your case file?
Yes, I was.
Okay. I'm going to move to State's Exhibit 13, which is just our next photograph. Let me zoom in on this. And where did you find this photograph, Agent Abercrombie?
This was located on one of the co-defendants' cell phones, I believe.
And does it appear that Eric Velasquez may have a bandana on or be making any kind of a hand gesture that would be consistent with a gang sign?
Yes, he's wearing a bandana on his face and he is throwing a gang sign.
Considering that there were multiple burglaries in the case, does it concern you as to where this location was taken, the location of this photograph?
Yes, it would appear that this particular photograph was not taken inside of Mr. Velasquez's residence, nor inside of any of the co-defendants' residence.
Okay. And of course, he is in a mask in this photograph.
Yes, he is. And he's also, it appears he's wearing a glove on his left hand.
Okay, so that would be 13. I'm going to move to State's Exhibit.
Hold on. Any objection, Mr. Wilson?
No.
I got a question. How do you know that's him?
He was identified through other co-defendants when they showed me that photograph.
Ms. Vance, I don't think I can consider that without more foundation.
Do you remember which co-defendant it was?
I do not recall off the top of my head which
Okay.
co-defendant showed me that particular photograph.
Do you remember if there are, thank you. Do you remember if there are other pictures of him in this shirt?
Yes, I believe that there are other photographs of him wearing this same shirt where his face is not covered.
Okay, and you were able to identify him in those photographs with his face?
Yes.
Okay. That's State's Exhibit 13, and we would still move to tender it for whatever value the court would put on it. I don't know that I formally tendered State's Exhibit 12 either.
12 was admitted, states 13.
Now, Your Honor, with the court's help, I would like to object to this for that same reason. Thank you.
I'm going to sustain the objection, states 13.
I'm going to show you State's Exhibit. I'll mark this as State's Exhibit 14. Do you recognize this as a photograph of Mr. Velasquez?
Yes, I do.
Okay, and were you able to find this in your case file as we were sitting in court and listening to the testimony?
Yes, these photos, as you can see, I'm taking a photograph of another cell phone. The cell phone would have either belonged to Anthony Macias or Giovanni Castillo. I don't recall which one at the time without referencing back to my case file. But it would have been while I was interviewing one of the two of them that I took these photographs from their phone as they were showing them to me.
Okay, and does this appear to be a hand sign?
Well, Your Honor, I can object to that. We need to know what exactly makes Agent Abercrombie an expert on gang signs. I don't think we've heard anything about that yet.
I don't know that for my question.
I think we most certainly do. You're asking if that's some type of gang sign. For someone to know if it's a gang sign, I certainly don't know what a gang sign is. I'm not an expert on that. We need to find out if she has any idea what she's talking about.
You want to lay your foundation, Ms. Vance?
Are you familiar with, have you ever worked on cases with gang members?
Yes, ma'am, I have.
Okay. Have you ever gone to any kind of trainings on prosecuting and making gang cases?
Yes, ma'am, I have.
Okay. Was there an effort put into this case into whether to charge any kind of gang act charges on this case?
There was extensive effort put into this investigation on whether or not we would be able to make gang charges against all of the co-defendants within this investigation.
Okay. Are you familiar with the fact that gang members use hand signs to identify gang affiliations?
Yes, I am. We also went even further and had GBI Gang Task Force experts come up to the Hall County Sheriff's Office to assist with interviews throughout this investigation to help us to determine gang affiliation for each co-defendant within this investigation. And so, yes, I am familiar with gang signs and gang symbols and individuals throwing signs, which is what Eric Velasquez appears to be doing in this photograph.
Okay. Are you familiar with what specific gang sign he's throwing?
I am not familiar with what specific gang sign he's throwing, as throughout my investigation, Eric was determined to be associated with more than one gang.
Well, we've already heard about Gangster Disciples. What other gangs was he determined to be linked to or affiliated with, or did he ever claim?
He did not claim. However, throughout other interviews conducted, I learned that a lot of the co-defendants associated with 4BM and 4PF, 4 Pockets Full and 4 Baby Mexico is what I was told those stood for. However, they all loosely associated with multiple different gangs, and we could not determine one gang, which was one of the reasons gang charges were not pursued within this investigation.
So without being able to identify a specific gang, is it fair to say this picture concerns you because it appears that Eric is throwing a gang sign?
That would be correct.
Okay. And is that gang sign consistent with the one in the prior photograph?
I believe it is. I
And
would
I'll
have
show
to.
you State's Exhibit 13 again. That's
Yes,
State's
it does
Exhibit
appear to
13,
be
and then this would
consistent.
be State's Exhibit.
It does appear to be consistent, yes, ma'am.
Okay, State would move to tender State's Exhibit 14.
Mr. Wilson,
No objection.
State's 14 is admitted.
And then the last one I'm going to show you is State's Exhibit 15, and I'll zoom back out. Were you able to find this photograph as we were sitting in court today as well?
Yes, ma'am, I was.
Okay, and why is this photograph significant to you based on, what we've heard in the sentencing?
This photograph is significant to me because Eric Velasquez has a black and white bandana over his right shoulder, which I know that the colors black and white are associated with gangster disciples.
Okay. Judge, I would move to tender 15 into evidence.
No objection.
State's 15 is admitted.
Are you aware of where Eric Velasquez was housed after his arrest in this case?
Yes, I know that he was housed in Gwinnett County Jail for a period of time, and I know that because I actually traveled to the Gwinnett County Jail to serve a search warrant on him to obtain his DNA, and at that time, all of the 4 defendants that had been arrested and charged with murder were housed in separate locations throughout other counties and not housed here specifically in Hall County, other than Hector Garcia Solis.
And was that partly for their own safety?
Yes, it was.
Okay, certainly law enforcement wanted to keep them apart. Would you agree that that was part of the motivation?
Yes, ma'am.
And were there also concerns that because Blane Dixon was well-liked in the Hall County Jail, that other inmates might hurt these 4 in the Hall County Jail?
Yes, I believe they were housed out for that specific reason, mainly for their own safety.
Okay. Did you have the chance to see Mr. Velasquez throughout the last 2 years at various occasions, including multiple court occasions?
Yes, I have.
Have you ever seen him injured?
I have not.
Okay, other than whatever unfortunate kind of growth or thing he's got on his ear related to maybe a piercing, have you ever seen any injuries or marks on him ever?
I have not.
Nothing else?
Mr. Wilson, anything else for this witness?
It's 2 questions. First, the reason you did not pursue gang membership charges were because you never found definitive evidence that he was a member of any one gang.
No, it's not that. It's that in order to proceed with gang charges in this investigation, we had to be able to determine one gang for all of the co-defendants to be
Okay, right. So the
associated
answer-
with
the
one
answer-
specific
The
gang.
answer to my question is yes, you never found proof that there was.
Hold on.
Well, I'm asking.
Ask your question again, answer yes or no, and then you can explain your answer. Ask your question again.
So the reason you did not pursue gang membership charges was because you could not find definitive proof that he was a member of any one gang? Yes or no?
No.
You can explain your answer.
I had evidence that he was a gang affiliate. However, I could not specifically identify one particular gang with him and all of the other co-defendants to pursue gang charges, and we were not going to pursue gang charges on only one individual because that is not how the law for gang charges would read for us to proceed in this investigation.
Okay, so you never found enough evidence to go forward with gang charges?
For all of the individuals, yes.
So the answer is yes, okay. All right, now as far as these gang signs, would you say that it would often happen that young kids, who, listen to rap music and all that, that they might throw up gang signs just to try and make themselves look tough?
I cannot answer that question.
Okay, have you ever seen that happen?
Well, on the occasions that I have seen that from other videos, those individuals that are throwing signs are usually associated with gangs.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Nothing else?
All right, thank you. You can step down. Anything else, Ms. Vance?
No, sir.
All right. Mr. Velasquez, we're going to send you back for just a moment and bring out Mr. Garcia, and then we'll bring you back out here in a little while. All right, we're here in State versus Hector Garcia Solis, 19 CR 1065C. First off, Mr. Cavendine, you filed a motion to continue sentencing on July 2nd. I think my office received it, well, I found it about 4 o'clock on July 2nd. And I subsequently sent an email to everyone about the filing of the motion and said I would decide on Tuesday. And so on July 6th, which was Tuesday, I entered an order denying the motion, but I wanted to give you a chance to perfect anything you wanted to on the record about that motion. Is there anything you need to put on the record?
Your Honor, we were still unable to locate the DJJ probation officer who handled Hector's case. Mr. Hoffer's files did contain some school records. We were not able to secure any witnesses pertinent to any of that. The only psychological evaluation that I have seen was a 2019 competency evaluation, and then something conducted for juvenile court prior to that, but none more recent than that, at least again that I found in the files, nor am I independently aware of any others. And otherwise, I would renew. I'm just trying to think if there's anything else that was in the motion that I have any updates for since last week. We were able to obtain some juvenile court records, mostly just order sheets from that court. And I believe that's all that I have to update. We would certainly renew our request for a continuance based on all the grounds stated previously, and I believe Mr. McNeil wants to tell me something. In addition, our mitigation expert that was hired, that was referenced in the motion, is available next week, and possibly, I'm sure, at points after that, but was unavailable in her entirety for this week. That's all that I will add.
All right, and I denied the motion. This trial had been specially set for months. And we did have the untimely demise of Mr. Hoffer. But I believe, at least it appeared, that the defense's plan had been to admit all of the acts except for malice murder. And so I would assume that the defense had plenty of notice that they needed to get their sentencing witnesses under subpoena and ready to go in this case. That couldn't have been a surprise prior to trial or even during the course of the trial. I've heard nothing that indicates that there's been any, that the mitigation expert was served with a subpoena, or if there's been any effort to try and obtain their testimony by Zoom or some other method. Simply been provided information that they're just not available. And I don't know that that's an acceptable response when they allegedly been retained to testify in the sentencing in a murder case. So in light of all those factors, this case is 2 years old, really 2 years old as of today. I'm going to deny the motion to continue sentencing, and we'll proceed. Before we go any further, Mr. Garcia, let me tell you a couple of things here on the record. You have some post-conviction rights. You have a right to file a motion for a new trial. You'd have to do that within 30 days of today's date. And you also have a right to file a motion or a notice of appeal. You'd have to do that within 30 days of today's date. And Mr. McNeil and Mr. Cavendine can assist you with preserving your appellate rights, and they also can assist you in securing appellate counsel if you choose to pursue those rights. Additionally, you have, so you have 30 days to file a motion for new trial. You have 30 days to file a notice of appeal from today's date, or 30 days from any adverse ruling on your motion for new trial. Additionally, you have a right to file a habeas corpus action. You have to do that within 4 years of today's date. All of that information is going to be on your sentence, and Mr. McNeil and Mr. Cavendon will continue to represent you until such time as you secure appellate counsel if you choose to pursue that. Okay? Yes, sir. All right. All right, Mr. Cavendon, Mr. McNeil, just for purposes of the record, one other thing, my understanding is Mr. Cavendon, his last week working for the Public Defender's Office is next week, or this week. And so I didn't want to delay sentencing either, because I believe Mr. Cavendon's going to work for the Georgia Supreme Court and would not be available to assist with sentencing either. All right. And one other thing, just to correct the record, so that no one's left with a false impression. I believe during closing arguments, Mr. McNeil said he'd only been on the case for 2 weeks. And I think he was trying to explain his knowledge of the case, or it was in a different context. But just so everyone's aware, the Public Defender's Office has represented Mr. Garcia from the date he was arrested, or soon thereafter. I believe they were appointed very soon after he was arrested. And Mr. McNeil came on the case late because Mr. Hoffer had been the lead attorney until his untimely death 2 weeks before the trial. And Mr. Cavendon's been on the case, as far as I know, since Mr. Garcia was arrested. He's certainly been involved in all the hearings that we've had over the course of 2 years. So I just didn't want to leave anyone with a false impression that somehow Mr. Garcia just got an attorney 2 weeks before a trial where he'd been tried for murder. He's had counsel the entire time. All right, Mr. Cavendon, Mr. McNeil, would y'all like to present any evidence in mitigation in this case?
Judge, if I may briefly, the state was talking, I don't know if we would agree to a Zoom if their mitigation expert is available. You know, I don't know what we had planned to be here all day. We have our witnesses ready, Your Honor. We're ready to go. But, you know, we want to make sure that Mr. Garcia-Solis is able to present what he, would like to present. So I don't know if that's an option or if the court would be able to facilitate that. I have the juvenile records too, so we're also, we're not planning to object to a lot of this if it's offered or stipulated.
I have the technology, but not the contact.
Yes, sir. Neither does the state.
Judge, we've been notified that she's unavailable. I have no reason to think that she would be available. I think that's where we're planning to leave it for today's purposes. Thank you.
All right, well, the record will reflect that you had the opportunity to present evidence by Zoom. All right. Okay, Mr. Cavendon, any evidence you wish to present in mitigation?
Yes, Your Honor. We'll have two witnesses. We'll have, first witness will be Hector's mother,
All right, and ma'am, if you just come around on this side, I'd appreciate it.
Your Honor, just to let the court know, Hector's mother is not bilingual. She'll be, I guess, need the assistance of the interpreter. And basically, she just wants to read a letter, but, obviously
Well,
she'll be available for cross.
Did anybody make my office aware that you needed an interpreter?
Yes.
I did request that, Your Honor. I requested the interpreter on Tuesday, and I've been in communication with Mr. Arenas, and he's here.
Okay, I wasn't aware. There he is, okay.
Yeah, we have one.
All right, Mr. McNeil,
Yes, I'll swear the interpreter in.
please.
Do you swear affirm that you will translate to the best of your abilities from English to Spanish and Spanish to English, in this case now pending before the court?
I do, sir.
Would you state your name for the record?
Guillermo Arenas, Arenas.
Thank you. Mrs. Solis, would you state your name for the court, please?
Señora Solís, por favor, diga su nombre a la corte, por favor.
Araceli Solís.
Araceli Solís.
Thank you. And can you tell us what your relationship to Hector is?
Gracias. ¿Me puede usted decir cuál es su parentesco con Héctor?
Su mamá.
His mother.
And you've had the opportunity to follow the course of this case through the past 2 years, have you not?
¿Usted ha tenido oportunidad de seguir el curso de este caso desde un principio?
Sí.
Yes.
And you know what we're here today for, correct?
¿Sabe por qué estamos aquí hoy, correcto?
Sí.
Yes.
And I believe there's some things you would like the judge to know before he sentences Hector.
Y usted creo que tiene algunas cosas que quiere que el juez sepa antes de sentenciar a Héctor.
Así.
Yes.
And I believe have you prepared a letter?
¿Usted preparó una carta?
Sí.
Would you like to read that to the court?
¿Quiere leerlo eso a la corte?
Sí.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Continúe.
Es algo muy breve, solamente primero que nada decirle a la familia del oficial lo mucho que lo sentí desde el primer momento que lo supe.
This is going to be something brief. I just want to express to the officer's family how sorry I am for what happened.
Nadie merece perder así la vida.
Nobody deserves to lose its life in this manner.
Al principio mi sentir fue más hacia el oficial.
At the beginning, my feelings were mostly towards the officer.
Me pudo mucho lo que estaba pasando.
It was very heavy for me what was going on.
Y no fue hasta el día miércoles que vi a Héctor en el hospital solo por 4 o 5 minutos.
And only until I saw Hector at the hospital for about 4 to 5 minutes,
que me permitieron verlo, ahí cambiaron mis sentimientos al verlo en esa condición.
when I was allowed to see Hector, my feelings changed towards him after I saw him in such a condition.
Lo único que yo pude sentir, lo único que toqué fueron sus pies, era lo único que tenía bien.
The only thing I could feel, the only thing I could touch were his feet. That was the only thing that was well on him.
Era terriblemente lo que él tenía, todos los daños que él tenía.
All the damages he suffered were really bad. It was terrible.
De Héctor, solo puedo decir que él siempre fue un niño activo, a su vez tranquilo, siempre amigable, siempre compartiendo, siempre tenía el gusto por correr, jugar, pintar, y era positivo ante todo, siempre fue positivo ante todo, con todos.
About Hector, I only can say that he always was a very active child, and also very quiet, friendly, and always sharing, with a lot of desire to run, play, and first of all, very positive.
Hacia el jurado solo dejar saber y que tomen en cuenta para su decisión los daños que él tiene.
And talking to the jury, just to let him know and ask him to take into account before they make the decision about the damages he has.
Él está en riesgo de perder la poca vista que le queda.
He's the risk of losing the little sight he has.
En el cerebro perdió una parte de su cerebro.
Lost a part of his brain.
Tal vez por eso perdió un poco de sus memorias.
That's maybe why he lost some of his memory.
Esto le afectó el gusto y el olfato.
Also, his sense of taste and smell was affected.
Perdió un pulmón.
Una parte del intestino también le cortaron y esta herida le duró muchos días abierto su estómago.
He lost a lung, part of his intestine, and this wound, it was open in his stomach for several days.
Esta herida en el estómago le duró muchos días abierta y tal vez por eso no le ha sanado del todo.
This wound on his stomach was open for several days. That's probably why he has not healed yet.
Con 4 balazos en su cuerpo ya no era necesario darle uno más.
Having 4 bullets in his body, it was not necessary to give him another one.
Que consideren y le permitan algún día salir en algún momento de su vida.
I want them to consider and allow him to, sometime in his life, to get out.
Desde el principio, él ya está pagando el error que cometió.
From the very beginning, he's already paying for the mistake he made.
El arrepentimiento de él es claro.
His regret is clear.
Yo sé que esto no va a cambiar las cosas,
I know this is not going to change anything,
pero sí pido para él una segunda oportunidad.
but I'm asking a second opportunity for him.
Era muy joven.
He was very young,
Y yo creo que él no pensó en todas las consecuencias de lo que estaba haciendo.
and I think that he didn't think about all the consequences about what he was doing.
Es todo lo que tengo que decir. Yo sé que fue mucho. Desconocía yo varias cosas de las que vi.
That's all I have to say. I know it was a lot. I didn't know a lot of things about, I learned about later.
A pesar de que yo no entiendo el idioma, los videos son claros.
In spite of me not understanding the language, the videos are very clear.
Y pues es todo lo que tengo que decir. Solo si me permiten decirle a él algo, que me perdone por no haber sabido conducirlo.
That's all I have to say. And if you allow me to tell him something, I want his forgiveness for not being able to guide him properly.
Es todo.
That's it.
Thank you.
Gracias.
All right. Thank you, ma'am. You can stay.
Gracias, señora. Se puede retirar.
Yes, sir. I think you need the interpreter any further.
No, I believe that's,
Thank you, sir.
thank you. Okay, Your Honor, at this time, we would like to call Hector Garcia Solis to the stand, please.
All right. Mr. Garcia?
Good morning, Hector. Would you raise your right hand, please? Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you will give in this matter now pending will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Would you state your name for the record?
Hector Garcia Solis.
Okay. Hector, we've had an opportunity to meet since the jury returned its verdict, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and we discussed, there's several things you'd like to get off your chest and tell the judge. Is that right?
Not really the judge, more the family.
The family, okay. Well, let's start with that. What would you like to tell the family, the Dixon family?
For what I've done to y'all, not one day goes by that I don't think about it. I think about saying goodnight to my mother, pops, my brothers and sisters, the kids home. And I directly end up thinking what I have done to y'all. I think, I'd be thinking he could be doing this right now. But I've taken that away from y'all, from him. For the pain that I've put on y'all, it doesn't ever leave me. The pain that I put on his mother, his father, his wife, his children, his brothers in blue, and his brothers and sisters in blue, his friends outside. I put such pain on them, and I can't get over it, what I've done to him that night. I wish I knew why I would do such a thing to someone like that. Why I would take a life. I lost somebody before, and to this day I don't stop thinking about her. And I would never want to put that pain on somebody else. That pain that just doesn't ever leave your head, that just takes over how you feel every day. Even in prayers, I be trying to talk with Mr. Dixon, just asking him for forgiveness for what I've done to him and y'all. And I literally wish I could be telling him face to face the fact that he died that night. Just doesn't ever feel good. It shouldn't. I just don't get why it was him and not me. Why a man like him was taken, and why not me, a fool like me? Somebody as a fool that just would be going down the wrong road, and somebody that literally was trying to help the city. I just don't get it. And I'm truly sorry for what I've done to y'all. I'm truly sorry. And I just never will stop praying for y'all. I'm truly sorry.
Thank you. That's all, Your Honor.
Ms. Vance?
Yes, Judge. Mr. Garcia Solis. I want to ask you about some of the prior history. Tell me when you're ready.
I'm ready. I'm good.
I want to ask you about that DUI, because you were charged as an adult and spent some time in jail before all the things that you were just convicted of, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And it was June 24th when you were arrested for DUI, right?
I don't really recall.
Does the date sound about right, though? Like maybe 2 weeks or 3 weeks before you ended up in jail for this murder?
Yes.
Do you remember this woman? Stand up, Deputy Sanchez. Do you remember encountering this woman at all? You can sit back down. Thank you.
I can't really see at a distance.
Okay.
I'm sorry, but from what I was told, I do believe I know her. I believe she was even working at the jail. So I don't know if it was her or not, but I just have a feeling I do know who it is.
And you may have seen her while you were in custody. Do you remember when you were arrested for DUI, they took you to jail and you kicked her in booking when they were trying to get you to the hospital?
I don't remember anything really from that night.
And you were bad drunk, right? You were pretty drunk that night, weren't you?
From what I was told, yeah.
Do you remember that you'd wrecked the car and then you were hiding in the woods when the deputies got there to investigate that DUI and the car wreck?
I honestly don't remember anything. I just remember what I was told.
Isn't it true that you had a ski mask in the car on June 24th when you got that DUI? And you had a fake gun in the car too, didn't you, Hector?
From what I was told, yeah.
You don't remember anything about that?
No.
You talked, in your trial, you were committing burglaries before the ones you were convicted of, weren't you?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And you were in the car back in May, like 2 months before you shot Deputy Dixon. You were driving in a car with Eric, and y'all were stopped by police, right? Adrian Verduzco was in that car with you then, back in May of 2019.
Yeah.
And there were bandanas, and there was a gun in the car with you then, right?
Not mine, but yeah.
Were y'all committing burglaries then?
Nah.
Why did you have a gun in the car with you when you were 17 with Eric and Adrian Verduzco?
The gun wasn't mine, but them boys, they like to be flexing and whatnot, so that's kind of why they would be riding around with it. But they wouldn't always have it. They would let it go, like, quick.
Let me go back to the DUI. So you remember going to the hospital, right? Do you remember, like, sobering up at the hospital?
Like when I woke up?
Yes.
Yeah.
And when you were at the hospital at the end of June, you weren't really nice to the nurses that were there, were you?
After the DUI?
Yes.
I don't remember, really. I just remember I woke up and I was trying to take everything off.
Do you remember that you were grabbing their private body parts, like their buttocks and their breasts?
After the DUI?
Yes.
Nah.
Do you remember doing that when you were in the hospital after you were shot?
Nah. I was going through the discovery pack thingy.
Yes.
As I was reading it, I did happen to like recall some things.
Okay.
But I don't remember ever grabbing a woman like that. I wouldn't do that. I don't ride like that.
Do you remember ever telling anybody at the hospital that let me go back to the DUI. So you went to the hospital and you woke up after the DUI and they let you go from the hospital, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And you already were on juvenile probation for the prior burglaries, right, Hector?
Mm-hmm.
So you went to juvenile court and you told them, I just got arrested for burglary, and that's when you actually went to jail for that DUI, or I'm sorry. You went to juvenile court and told them, I just got a DUI charge. And in juvenile court, that's when you were booked on June 27th and actually went to jail for the DUI.
I didn't go to court at all. No.
You remember talking to your juvenile probation officer on June 27th,
Yeah.
right? And then that's when they sent deputies down to actually arrest you and take you to jail for the DUI, right?
Yeah.
And that was also for a felony obstruction for kicking Deputy Liliana Sanchez, right?
Well, I never found out about her kicking her till when I was told here.
Okay. And your sweet mom that we just heard from, she didn't bond you out when you were in jail for that DUI and the obstruction. Your mom didn't bond you out. You sat in jail for about a week, didn't you?
About like a week, two.
Yeah.
To a one.
And it was actually Abigail Reyes that bonded you out on July 2nd, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. The cars that you were just convicted of, I think you were convicted of the Dodge Avalon. That car that you were convicted of theft on, that was stolen on July 2nd, the day you got out of jail for the DUI and the obstruction, wasn't it?
Yeah. Not by me, though. And the reason Abby bailed me out was because she could and my mama couldn't. And, the bail was a little bit of a bill, so she had to wait for the money to come in. So.
It was about 4 days after you got out of jail for the DUI and obstruction that you committed that ring of burglaries, right? That all those 8 burglaries and thefts that you were just convicted of, right? It was about 4 days after you got out of jail, wasn't it?
About 4, I believe so. 6, yeah, it's
Okay.
4.
And so then it was about 5 days after you got out of jail on the DUI and the obstruction that you shot and killed Blane Dixon, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Do you remember telling nurses at the hospital that you had shot Deputy Dixon because you didn't want to go back to jail?
I remember saying something that when I woke up, I shot a man and I effed up. I don't know if I remember saying that I shot him to go away or run away.
Do you remember telling a deputy
To give me shake my hand?
to shake your hand?
Yeah, I remember reading that and it hit me and I was like, yeah, I remember doing that. I remember asking for the time, to see the time, and then they told me to look at it and tell them what time it was, and I would say it, and they were like, yeah, good job. I remember, I'm sorry, I was about to just say everything I remember. I'm sorry, go on.
No, that's fine. You would agree that the deputies that were at the hospital treated you pretty well, didn't they? I mean, nobody was ugly or mean to you. You were hurt bad, but you were taken care of and you got better, didn't you?
I mean, yeah, they were, yeah.
Do you remember telling a deputy that you wanted to shoot someone and you asked that deputy if he'd ever shot anybody? Do you remember saying that around July 23rd or July 24th?
Yeah, I don't know, but it sounds kind of familiar. I don't know, really, to be honest.
Do you remember that after you had murdered Blane Dixon, you would make your hands like in the shape of a gun and point it at the deputies that were watching you at the hospital?
I believe I only did that one with that one supposedly Puerto Rican guy.
Okay. Is that, stand up for me, Sita. Is that Deputy Sita right here that you pointed your fingers at like a gun?
I'm sorry, again, I can't really say
You
the
can't say-
distance.
okay.
Yeah.
Do you remember, so one of your middle fingers was shot off, right? Like,
I remember I flicked him off, or not really flicked him off, but I was kind of trying him. Yeah, I remember that.
okay, so you were trying him. Like you were trying to kind of be a jerk,
goofball
right?
with it.
A goofball, sure.
I mean, yeah, that's how I be with my friends and whatnot. We
Okay,
be, yeah.
and you flipped him off, you remember that?
Yeah, supposedly flick him off, yeah.
Do you remember when you were in the hospital recovering after you were shot that you grabbed the breast and buttocks of the nurses and spit at them the same way that you had done when you were in the hospital sobering up from your DUI?
No, again, I don't remember ever doing that, much less spitting on somebody. That's even more disrespectful. Well, not more disrespectful, to be honest, but that's, nah.
Do you remember that they had to put a spit guard on you to cover your face so you wouldn't spit on the nurses and the deputies when you were in the hospital after you'd been shot?
No, I don't remember having anything on my face, to be honest.
What did it feel like to see your mom come up here and testify and not even be able to look at you in the face? What did that feel like for you, Hector?
I mean, like I said in the trial, man, it just from all that I brought onto my name, to our name, it just brought disgrace, anger, a bit of hate. I remember calling my cousin. She told me she was mad super mad at me when they heard about this. I mean, how would you feel if you saw your son that way?
I can't imagine. Your mom apologized for you, but none of this is her fault, is it?
Nah.
Your mom loved you and she tried, didn't she?
She tried?
She tried to raise you right. It's your fault that Deputy Dixon is killed and no one else's, right?
Nah, and I don't see why y'all were putting that on Eric or London either, to be honest. I took full responsibility for it from day one.
Why didn't you plead to malice murder? You came in and you said, I did the felony, but I didn't do malice. Why didn't you plead to malice murder?
Because I don't have malice in me. If I had malice in me, you don't think it would have gone a different way? You don't think we would have brought the big guns and the vest? The big guns, not two little guns, the big guns.
Oh, so you're telling the judge if you had malice, you would have brought the AK-47, right?
If I had malice, I would have gone down a different way.
I don't have anything else.
Mr. McNeil, anything else?
Just talk about the hospital. You remember in the hospital you referred to the Puerto Rican deputy?
Yeah.
Did you consider him a friend?
Well, he was cool. He was kind of like the cool one.
And what kind of conversation? Did you have something about why you thought he was Puerto Rican, but why he looked some other way?
I mean, I remember I think I asked him of his ethnicity, and he told me he was from Puerto Rico. So yeah.
Did he say anything else? Joking around?
Not that I can remember.
Okay, that's all. All right, but you were joking around with him.
Yeah, and I just want to say for Miss Sanchez, for the drunk version of me, I guess I could say, I'm sorry for the that I kicked you. That was honestly super bad, not good. I'm sorry for that.
All right, thank you.
Anything else, Ms. Vance?
No, sir.
All right, Mr. Garcia, you can step down. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Mr. Cavanaugh, Mr. McNeil, anything else?
No, Your Honor.
State.
Yes, Your Honor. Judge, I have multiple live witnesses. The state is going to ask for life without parole on Mr. Garcia-Solis. And for that reason, the United States Supreme Court's kind of backed off on the specific findings, but we were prepared to present specific findings for the court, so I have multiple witnesses. I do think the court can certainly consider everything that you've heard in this case. So I would encourage you to specifically consider the 404B matters. I'm going to present testimony from Deputy Sanchez and Lieutenant Rayner in the DUI. We think the timing is incredibly significant. But I would also just return your attention to the prior burglary that Mr. Garcia-Solis admitted doing. The victim at Texano is scared of him to this day. They increased security because of him, and that was due to the August 2018 burglary at Texano that Mr. Garcia-Solis committed. Additionally, I would ask the court to remember the May 2019 incident where he was driving. Eric Velasquez was arrested by Officer Jason Pierce, and the state thinks the relevance of that is that there was a gun in the car and bandanas. And certainly we think that goes to his dangerousness, Judge, and whether he is rehabilitatable or not. As to specifically the DUI incident, I would call witnesses, and I would first call, I think Lieutenant Rayner's here. I would call him to the stand.
All right. And Mr. McNeil, Mr. Cavanaugh, any objection to the court considering the evidence I heard in the 404B motions regarding Mr. Garcia?
Not the evidence, Your Honor. I would remind Your Honor that Your Honor did not find sufficient evidence of gang membership to allow any substantive evidence in as to that issue at trial, and would suggest that, if anything, the evidence as that was slightly stronger against Eric than it was against Hector. As far as prior burglaries go, no, Hector himself was ready to testify about those at trial up until there were objections made and legal issues came into play. I'm just trying to remember what other main character or what other main issues were in play in the 404B context, but those are the main ones that I'm recalling: was attention to detail, Texano's Go auto sale. We have no objection to any of those being looked at. Again, the state's, I think, fairly weak showing of gang issues involving some of the co-defendants, which I would object to based on the prior rulings of the court. As far as the hospital behavior goes, Judge, I mean, I know that there was just a proffer made about it. I would simply remind Your Honor what came out at the Jackson-Deno hearing was that Dr. Strouthar testified that there was a possible ICU delirium diagnosis during much of those early weeks before Hector left the ICU. July 23rd and 24th, by my recollection, he still would have been in the ICU at that point and was, I believe, still receiving Geodon and fentanyl on a very regular basis. I don't have the medical records in front of me. Nevertheless, Your Honor found that statements made around that time were involuntarily made under the Due Process Clause. I would argue that that extremely limits their probity and the value that they have here at sentencing.
All right. Well, specifically on the 404B hearing, there were 4 incidences that the court heard evidence on. There was 2018 burglary of Texano auto sales and attention to detail, and
No objection.
You don't object to that. The second was a June 2018 burglary of Go Auto and that theft by taking of a motor vehicle.
No objection.
The third incident was the May 3rd, 2019 traffic stop.
No objection.
And then the fourth was the June 2019 DUI and felony obstruction.
No objection. I mean, we may have specific questions regarding the live witnesses presented, but no objection to them being considered in general. I would also, again, remind the court that in May 2019, it was Eric who was in possession of the firearm in the car.
Yes.
That's all.
All right. Please proceed, Ms. Vance.
Thank you, Judge. Raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you work alongside Officer Aponte on June 24th of 2019 when he was investigating a DUI in a car wreck?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
Okay. And was Hector Garcia Solis found at the scene, and was he determined to have been driving that car when it wrecked?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Was he the only person that was found in that car? And as far as the investigation showed, the only person that was in that car when it wrecked?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you remember that he was hiding in the woods when you and Aponte went to the scene?
Yes, ma'am. We had worked the scene for a few minutes, and I'd already called for a wrecker to come get the vehicle when I heard somebody making a noise in the woods just out in front of the car. I walked into the woods, and that's when I saw Mr. Solis laying on the ground.
Okay.
And he matched the description of what our original caller gave us as the driver.
Okay. So the call came in as a car wreck with a description of the driver?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Do you remember suspicious items that were found in the car and that you had concerns about possible robberies or burglaries?
Yes, ma'am. In the back seat was a navy blue ski mask, and in the floorboard was when I first looked at it, looked like a revolver handgun. Until I picked it up, that's when I realized it was not real. But when I first saw it, I thought it was what I know as a Smith & Wesson 686 357 Magnum.
If you would pull up that microphone just a little bit. Thank you.
Yes,
Go ahead.
So you said that you saw a navy blue ski mask in the back seat and what looked to be a Smith & Wesson revolver in the floorboard.
Yes, ma'am.
When were you able to determine that it wasn't actually a Smith & Wesson firearm?
When I actually picked it up.
Okay. And is that because it just wasn't as heavy?
Yes, ma'am. It was plastic.
Okay. Was that a concern to you? And do you remember asking dispatch about any unsolved robberies, armed robberies, or burglaries in the area?
Yes, ma'am. Based on the way the car had wrecked, it looked like it had been at a high rate of speed on Stevens Road, and it just went through the stop sign at Jim Crow Road. So I was worried that maybe we had a armed robbery in the area. So I asked dispatch, did they have any reports of any armed robberies in our county or any surrounding counties that might be involving a blue Ford Mustang with a suspect with a silverish gray handgun and a ski mask.
Okay. And did you get any information that there was anything at that?
They didn't have any at that time.
Okay. Do you recognize Mr. Garcia Solis in the courtroom, and can you point him out for the judge?
Yes, ma'am. It's the young man sitting next to the attorneys with the black and white stripe.
And he was super intoxicated that night.
Yes, ma'am, very.
Are you aware of whether he was booked immediately or had to go to the hospital to be medically cleared?
He had to go to the hospital due to his intoxication level because the jail won't take anyone in once they're overly intoxicated for their health reasons.
Okay. Were DUI charges taken so that he could be booked once he was released from the hospital?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I don't have anything else.
No questions, Your Honor.
All right. Thank you. You can step down.
Thank you, sir.
State would call Deputy Sanchez. Raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do swear.
You can have a seat, make yourself comfortable. Like the judge said, just make sure you're speaking into the microphone. Tell the judge your name and where you work.
My name is Liliana Sanchez, and I've been certified through the Hall County Sheriff's Office for 3 years, but I've been working for them for 5.
Okay. Were you working in booking on June 24th of 2019?
No, I was not. I was actually assigned to the patrol division, and I was in the Sally Port of the booking area because I was bringing somebody else to jail.
Okay. Did you end up encountering Deputy Aponte and Hector Garcia Solis on that night?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Tell me what happened when you encountered Hector.
So I was sitting in my car finishing up paperwork when Deputy Aponte had walked past the front of my car, and he was like, "Hey, can you help me get this guy? He threw up all over himself, and I'm not good with throw up. Can you help me with that?" I said, "Sure." I went, put on gloves, and I walked over to the driver's side of Deputy Aponte's vehicle. When we opened up the door, that's when I came across Hector Solis. I didn't know who he was, and from what Aponte told me, they could not get a name or a date of birth out of him. We had no idea who he was. So I told Hector to go ahead and get out of the car. I grabbed him under his left arm to help him get up and walked him over to the actual intake area of booking. He was yelling, he was screaming. I couldn't tell you to this day what he was saying. It's not something that I tend to listen to, the drunken slurs of a person, unless it's something along the lines of suicidal thoughts. Other than that, I tend to just let it be unless they're screaming that they're in agonizing pain. We took him into the intake area, and because of the yelling, the screaming, the pulling away, the pushing, all the extras that he was doing, several other officers came into the intake area as well. We had him placed in front of the main booking wall that we have all of the inmates stand in front of and face the wall until officers can get their paperwork ready, and the nurse that's assigned to booking can come and evaluate him. And that nurse pretty much checks everybody that comes in and sees their state of mind to see if they are intoxicated, if we're able to take them in, or if they do have to go to the hospital to be evaluated there and be taken care of there before we admit them into the jail. The nurse, I don't remember his name. I know that he was the very tall black man, but I can't remember his name. He came in and he was trying to get any type of information out of Hector. He was asking normal questions, and Hector just kept yelling and screaming and just was not in any way, shape, or form answering any of the questions or even acknowledging that we were trying to speak to him. He just kept on yelling and screaming. Hector, at one point turned and looked towards the nurse as I was still holding his arm, turned and looked towards the male nurse and began screaming at him. I don't remember what he was saying, but he began screaming at him and started to lean forward like he was going to walk towards him. I held onto his arm even more. I faced him back towards the wall, and I know another officer came and grabbed him on the other arm. Don't know who the other officer was, but I know another officer came and grabbed him by the arm. The nurse said he's way too intoxicated. He has to go to the hospital. The nurse stepped out, and the way the sliding doors work in booking, only one door could be open at a time. There is an override that they can do in the master control, but usually only one door can be opened at the time. So when the inside slider door closed, that's when the outside slider door opened. That's where we're able to go back to the vehicles and take him to the hospital. So we walked out back to Deputy Aponte's car, and instead of approaching the driver's side where he first came out of, we were putting him on the passenger side. So the back passenger door opened, and Hector sat down in the seat. He was still yelling and screaming the entire way, but we ended up getting him over to the car. When we opened up the back door, Hector did sit down, and I'm telling him, put your feet inside. He goes, I'm not putting my feet inside. Deputy Aponte walked over to the driver's side, opened up the back door, and reached in to pull Hector back. When he pulled Hector back, trying to get him inside of the vehicle, the top half of Hector almost laid down, and his feet still stayed outside of the car. So Aponte went to go, readjust himself to get a better grip to pull him deeper into the seat, and Hector had picked up his leg, and I remember telling him, "Don't kick me." He said, "I'm gonna kick you." I said, "Don't kick me." And when Aponte went to go pull him the second time, he sent his leg straight out and he kicked me. I do remember I'd punched him in the face just once to tell him don't do it again. And after that point, he Aponte pulled him back into the car, and we were able to close the door. When we did close both doors, Hector Garcia sat up in the seat and screamed, "Ha!" and just had blood and everything, and made it seem as if he thought it was funny because he was just laughing about it. I was like, okay. So Aponte started driving him to the hospital, and I also followed behind Aponte to the hospital. When we got to the hospital, Hector did not want to get out of the car. So we ended up having to pull him out of the vehicle and walk him into the hospital. Where we park is not the main emergency entrance that normal civilians would go in through. We use the ambulance entrance, and that is where we parked, and we pulled Hector out and walked him into the hospital. So as we were walking through the hospital, he was kicking and screaming and jumping, and we ended up stopping and just holding him up in the air for a second. And Aponte was like, if he does this again, because he kept on kicking and flailing his legs all over. Aponte said, if he does it again, just take him to the ground. We can't have him kick nobody. I said, sure. So we put him back down on the ground and kept on walking back to the room. Once we got him to the room, the medical staff took a hold of him and did all that they had to do.
Okay. Did you actually have any bruises or marks from being kicked by Mr. Garcia Solis?
I did. I actually went on vacation about a week later. It was scheduled beforehand, but I had gone on vacation about a week later, and the photos that I had taken, you could see the actual bruise mark. I don't have the pictures. That was an old phone, and I wasn't very proud of the pictures anyways because they were there, so I ended up deleting pretty much all of them.
But to be, like, you didn't have any broken bones or anything like that?
No, I did have a pretty decent-sized bruise on my leg.
Okay. The person that you've described, do you see him in the courtroom, and can you point him out to the judge?
Yes, he's sitting right there. He has it's a faded white and black uniform jumpsuit, and he's wearing black glasses.
And that's the person that kicked you in the jail?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And that was on or about June 24th of 2019?
Correct.
Okay. Is it the process of the hospital to keep someone, I guess, until they're medically cleared? Do you know anything about that process or how the hospital discharges individuals?
I do not.
Are you aware of whether or not there were any charges taken for felony obstruction based on
him kicking me? Yes.
Okay. Did you take that warrant out?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Nothing else at this time?
I have no questions, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. You can step down.
State will call Chris Williamson.
Raise your hand. Swear testimony you give before the court today shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes, sir.
All right, you can go ahead and be seated.
Tell the court your name and where you work.
I am Sergeant Christopher Williamson, and I work for the Hall County Sheriff's Office, and I have for 17 years now.
Okay. And do you work in booking, or
I do.
have you?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. If I showed you documents related to a DUI and a felony obstruction, would you be able to testify based on those documents as to when those charges were served and when a defendant was taken into custody and then when a defendant was bonded out?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I'm going to approach the witness, Judge.
You may.
Just take a look. Does this appear to be warrants for felony obstruction
Yes, ma'am.
against Liliana Sanchez?
Yes, ma'am.
And that's charging Hector Garcia Solis?
That is correct. Yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
based on an offense on June 24th of 2019?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and then also striking a fixed object, a misdemeanor, moving violation 46272, based on a car wreck on June 24th of 2019?
Yes, ma'am.
That charge was taken out by Deputy Aponte?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And that charged Hector Garcia Solis?
Yes, ma'am.
And then, was there also a DUI charge based on the same date taken out by Deputy Aponte charging Hector Garcia Solis with a DUI offense as well?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And an open container offense as well against Hector Garcia Solis on that same date?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And then a driving on a suspended license charge against Hector Garcia Solis on that same date taken out by Deputy Aponte?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Can you tell me what date these warrants were actually served and what date
Hector Garcia Solis would have gone into custody on these warrants?
These warrants appear to be executed on the 27th of June, 2019.
Okay, and then if you can flip to the back and tell me if there's any release paperwork
Yes, ma'am.
that would have indicated when Mr. Garcia Solis was released from jail.
Yes, ma'am. This is bond and paperwork. It appears he was released on, the second day of June 2019.
Or July 2019?
July, I'm sorry. Yes, ma'am. 2/7/2019.
Okay, nothing further.
No questions.
All right, you can step down. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Excuse me, Judge. The state would call Deputy Kevin Edwards. Raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Have a seat, make yourself comfortable. Tell the judge your name and where you work.
Deputy Edwards, Kevin Edwards, work at Court Services.
And how long have you worked with the sheriff's office?
Going on 18 years.
Did you get assigned to watch Mr. Hector Garcia Solis when he was in the hospital, but in custody after he had murdered Blane Dixon?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, tell the judge about how his behavior was at the hospital, and if you ever noticed anything from him that was offensive or insulting. And I want you to tell the judge about his awareness. You know, I want you to only testify about things that Mr. Garcia Solis was doing when he was awake, and if he, you know, appeared to you to understand what he was doing.
Yes, ma'am.
Tell the judge what you saw.
While we were on watch, Mr. Solis would point his finger at us and act like he was shooting us.
Were you in uniform when you were watching him?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And this was after he had murdered Blane Dixon?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Did this happen one time or more than one time?
Multiple times.
Did you personally observe that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. When you're watching him in the hospital and you know he has killed a deputy and he makes a finger gun at you, what was your response?
It was hard to digest as to what he had done.
Was your job when you were at the hospital to do anything other than just to keep him in custody and make sure he was safe and secure?
Yes, ma'am. Just to watch the area and people that came in and out.
Okay. I don't have anything else.
No questions.
All right, you can step down. Thank you.
State would call Danny Sita. Raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Tell the judge your name and where you work.
My name is Danny Sita. I work at Hall County Sheriff Office.
And Sita, did you also get assigned to watch Hector Garcia Solis when he was in the hospital recovering after he had murdered Blane Dixon?
Yes, ma'am.
Are you the person that he described earlier when he spoke as the Puerto Rican?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you talk to him at different times?
Yes.
And did you tell him you were Puerto Rican?
Yes.
Okay. Did he ask you?
Well, he asked the nurses and the officer all these personal questions about their, private information, and based on my experience and of him being Hispanic, I went and told him that I was from Puerto Rican.
And why did you do that?
Because that will let him know that I may speak Spanish, and that way he will not say any Spanish with me being present, because he know that I would know what he's talking about.
Okay, and you're not Puerto Rican, are you?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Did you witness any, in the times that Mr. Garcia Solis appeared to be awake and conscious, I want you to tell the judge about any offensive or insulting things that you saw him do.
Well, at the beginning, when he come around, they would have to put a face mask on him because he was spitting and trying to bite the nurse. And then while the nurse trying to treat him, they would lean over or stand next to the bed. He was trying to fondle the female breast and the button, that private area. So a lot of female nurse, the younger one refused to treat him, so the older nurse would do the job. And he doesn't realize that there were multiple deputy in the room, so he would, when he recognized the officer was in the room, he would, as soon as they turned around, he would shoot them a bird or point a finger like a gun at them as they were leaving or walking out.
And you said you talked to him. So in terms of, we only want the judge to consider things that Hector knowingly does. So in terms of, his ability to converse, when he was doing these things that you're talking about, was this in time periods where he appeared conscious and was able to communicate in some way?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I'm going to show you what I've marked as State's Exhibit 16. Did you actually document a photograph of Hector shooting a bird, a middle finger, at a deputy?
Yes, ma'am.
Showing you that picture, does that appear to be the picture that you recognize and that you saw Hector doing this in the hospital?
Yes, ma'am. That's one of several pictures that we took while he was there.
I would move to tender State's Exhibit 16 into evidence and to publish it, Your Honor.
No objection.
State 16 is admitted. You may publish.
Thank you, Judge. Now, obviously, Cita, Mr. Garcia Solis was very injured, right? I mean, he had a lot of, he was shot multiple times and was undergoing different medical interventions.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Did it appear that as time went on, he was able to focus? You said sometimes he didn't know there were several deputies, but when he would see a deputy, he would flip his middle finger or do some other gesture.
Yes, ma'am. He would tell me that the other deputy was mean to him, like that I was the nicest one there, that we would talk to him.
And when you said you saw him doing this, was he doing it directed at a deputy that was in a Hall County Sheriff's Office uniform?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Were you also present at different occasions where he talked about murdering Blane Dixon?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Was there ever a time where the murder was brought up that Mr. Garcia Solis didn't seem to know what was being talked about?
Are you talking about like?
I mean, were you aware of more than one occasion where he made some statements about having killed a cop?
Yeah, he volunteered to make a statement himself because we were advised to maintain the safety of Mr. Garcia and that's why the staff there, and we're not to do any contact with Mr. Garcia unless he voluntarily speaks to us, but we were not to make any talking to him, anything about the case at all, other than watching his safety.
So as far as you were aware, there was never a time where that murder was brought up that Mr. Garcia Solis didn't seem to remember it or didn't seem to know what was being discussed?
That's correct.
Okay. I don't have anything else at this time.
No questions.
All right, you can step down. Thank you.
State would call Deputy Hill. Raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Have a seat. Tell the judge your name and where you work.
My name is Deputy James Hill. I work at the Hall County Sheriff's Office.
And were you assigned as well to guard Mr. Hector Garcia Solis when he was in the hospital after he'd murdered Blane Dixon and before he was medically released to the jail?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Did you watch him on one occasion or more than one occasion?
More than one occasion.
Okay. Some of the testimony that you've heard, did you see anything similar to that? Did you see any insulting or offensive behavior from Mr. Garcia Solis?
Yes, ma'am.
And again, we only want to talk about things that he was knowingly doing. You know, certainly if he's dreaming, we don't want to talk about that. We want to talk about things that he appears to consciously understand and be intentionally doing. What did you see that he appeared to intentionally be doing? And make sure you're talking in the microphone as much as you can.
He would he'd make finger guns, shoot them at us. He shot me the bird a few times. And then there, on multiple occasions, he actually tried to kick me when I would be walking past his bed.
Do you remember a time specifically around July 23rd or 24th, so kind of towards the end of his stay, where he asked you if you had ever shot anyone, and he said he wanted to shoot someone?
Yes, I remember that.
Tell the judge about that conversation with him.
I think it was right about shift change. He was eating breakfast. It was pretty early in the morning, and he had asked me how long I had been a police officer, and I had told him I hadn't been certified long, just a few months. Then he proceeded to ask me if I had shot anybody, and I told him no, that I still was assigned to the jail. I hadn't done patrol or anything. And then that's when he had stated, well, I would like to shoot someone.
I don't have anything else.
No questions.
All right, you can step down.
State would call Emily Nordick. Raise your right hand. Do you swear and affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, ma'am.
Have a seat. Tell the judge your name and where you work.
Emily Nordhook. I work at Northeast Georgia Medical Center.
How long have you worked at the hospital?
6 years.
And what is your duties and job at the hospital?
I'm a respiratory therapist.
Did you work on Hector Garcia Solis?
Yes.
And what kind of care did you perform for him?
So Hector was intubated, so when he was on the ventilator, we take care of him 24 hours a day. He was also trached, so we took care of him pretty much from the time he was admitted to the time he was discharged.
I'm going to ask you a couple questions. I'm not going to ask you about the specific, well, did he make a specific statement about the subject matter of this case to you?
Yes.
I'm not going to ask you the specifics of that because the judge had made a prior ruling about that, but I want to ask you a little bit about dates. Had the hospital very recently treated Mr. Garcia Solis for something unrelated about a week or 2 weeks prior?
Yes, ma'am.
And was that when he was taken there after the DUI?
Yes, ma'am.
Tell me about his behavior when he was in the hospital, sobering up and being treated after the DUI incident.
He was rude. He was kicking. That's pretty much all I experienced with him after the DUI.
Okay, but you had personal experience with him like at the end of June of 2019?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Do you remember the date that he made that statement? Is that when he first got his trach out and you were working with him on the trach?
Ask the question again, sorry.
The date that he first made some admissions to you, is that when he first got the trach out?
I don't remember the date.
Okay, if I told you that you had previously testified it was about July 19th, would that sound about accurate?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Was he acting consistently when after he was shot, when you were working with him on his tracheotomy, was his behavior towards the nurses consistent with his behavior in the DUI at the end of June?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So your opinion from knowing him would be that it wasn't attributed to the shooting or his treatment necessarily, but that's consistent with the way you know Hector Garcia Solis to be?
Correct.
I'm going to check that's a compound question. I mean, to the extent that she said it was consistent, I believe that was asked and answered.
Overall, just continue.
Did you ever see him grabbing the intimate parts of anybody at the hospital, or did he ever do that to you?
I witnessed him grab a nurse's breast, and he did not grab me, but he kicked me in the back
Okay, was that when he was being treated after being shot or at the DUI?
after being shot.
Okay. I don't have anything else.
What was his blood alcohol content at the end of June when you saw him the first time?
I don't recall.
Nothing further. Thanks.
Thank you, ma'am. You can step down.
Judge, we don't have any further aggravating evidence.
All right. All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is what we're going to do. It's 11:25. We're going to take a recess until 11:45. Well, let's do 11:40, so 15 minutes. Let's take a 15-minute recess. When we come back, I'm going to ask that we bring out all three defendants, and at that time, if the state has any victim impact evidence they wish to present, we'll do that with all three defendants here in the courtroom together, and then we'll go from there. We're probably not going to take a lunch break, so if you need a pack of crackers or something, now is a good time to do it. We'll see everybody back at 11:40.